We're joined as we are each month by Mayor Donna Deegan, here to answer your questions, and questions are rolling in already. You can join our conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937 or emailing firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Uh, Mayor Deegan, I've been gone the last couple of
I
times.
know I was starting to take this personally, but I know you had a lot of family stuff going on, and I'm grateful to have you back.
Yeah, so let's catch up. I mean, how is this whole mayor thing going?
The mayor thing is going well. Budget season is always a bit contentious, and that's why somebody asked me a couple months ago, how's it going? And I said it's always going to go. And I know people can't see me, but I'm sort of going like a wave. It goes up and down depending on whatever the issues are. And budget season is always the most contentious. So that's where we are. But hopefully, we're about to bring it in for a landing, and so far it's looking pretty good.
When does that wrap?
Wraps on the 24th.
Okay, so a little bit of time. So I want to start because I've been talking about it. So many people have been focused on it and living with it. Flooding, really tough week of rain.
Couple weeks, yeah.
Yeah, and much more to come. It sounds like
Yep.
maybe another 6 to 9 inches in the next couple of days.
Yep.
Some communities have seen as much as 15 inches. So
Yeah.
this is hurricane level flooding.
Yeah, I think sometimes when there's not a name attached to a system that people don't expect to have as much flooding with it, and that's not always the case. I was talking to Ann Colanesi, our resilience officer, about this yesterday, and she said, people don't always recognize that between August and October, we have a lot of rain. And I was actually talking to Tim about this yesterday because I said, people keep using words like historic. And he said, well, it's been a wet August and beginning of September, but by no means historic. He said it may be top 10, but it's not historic rains. We just get a lot of rain this time of year. And obviously, we've had a lot in a short period of time.
Different this time, though. I mean, first of all, it's not a tropical system, right? It's just a
Nope.
front that's stalled over us. But neighborhoods that I am not associating with flooding, I mean, obviously San Marco has flooded terribly, and it often does flood terribly. But neighborhoods like St. Nicholas, where you have whole blocks of neighborhoods where people's cars are destroyed because they flooded out, their homes have flooded, and that seems different.
Well, and there are homes in St. Nicholas that we've had to buy that are over by the river because they've flooded so badly over the years. There are some areas in our city that are more low lying than others, and they are going to have more issues. But in terms of what we're seeing right now, I was asking Nina Sickler in Public Works about this. Is this a storm drain thing or what? She said, most of the neighborhoods that are having these issues are neighborhoods that were built before we had the modern infrastructure in of storm ponds and other things that can collect that water. So it tends to collect and overwhelm our systems when it's really a lot of rain, and then little by little it drains back off. But our systems are working. In San Marco we had all of our pumps going at full power, and still, you can't always keep that rain from collecting. What we're trying to avoid is exactly what you were saying, and that is getting into cars, getting into homes, and that's a long-term process. But I would point out to folks that the rivers aren't going down; they're going up, and that's what we have got to remain focused on as we look forward. Is that if you'll allow me just a moment to expound on this a little bit,
Yeah.
because I do think it's important that we take a look at the thing as a whole. Back when the Better Jacksonville plan was first proposed, what was that, 24, 25 years ago? I'm trying to remember exactly when. But the because of our rising seas, our rivers have also risen between 3 and 6 inches since then.
Wow.
So you had San Marco, which was just a little bit above sea level, which is now almost at sea level,
Mm.
and that's going to continue to get worse. So the pumps are going to come online with this new LaSalle station as of early 2025, and that will be helpful. But at the end of the day, this is a long-term issue that we're going to have to deal with because of a changing climate. And so it really makes it that much more important that we look far out on this, which we've been doing with our compound flood model. But at the end of the day, this is a problem we're going to be dealing with, and we're spending tens of millions of dollars on infrastructure every year.
Do you think people, though, are getting the message? I saw somebody interviewed on one of the stations, and he was asked, what do you think is happening here? And he was like, well, I guess our drains aren't working. And it was like, that's not it, right?
That's not it. The
Yeah.
drains are working. In fact, only about 20% of the issues we have had have been because of something that perhaps wasn't working properly. and we're getting tickets on those and getting those done as quickly as we can. But by and large, where you've seen most of the issue, it's been because we have had a preponderance of rain, and it just takes a while for our system to get rid of that.
Are there any city policies that can help even as a stopgap? And I posted on Twitter this morning a photo that our news director here took of Landon Avenue in San Marco, where they actually have no wake zone signs
Mhm.
posted on the street because as people drive through and push through, their wake is going into homes
Right.
and causing a lot more damage. Can the city create a no wake zone for flooded neighborhoods?
Well, those are things we certainly are gonna have to discuss as we go forward. I think, as I said, the most important thing is we wanna make sure that we are creating a scenario where we're not getting water into people's homes and businesses and into their cars and things like that. But in terms of those flooded streets, you know, I think you're gonna have to think of it as you would if you have construction going on your street, or you have perhaps an event where the street has to be blocked off for a little while, or you have to go another way. That those waters will eventually drain off, but as long as they're not damaging people's homes and cars and businesses, I think that's what we're most concerned about. Those roads will drain, but we may need some signage or something like that to tell people, "Hey, don't get into these dangerous waters," because what we don't want is people driving through those waters and getting into trouble.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Mayor Donna Deegan. She's taking your calls and questions. You can email them, you can reach out on social media, or you can call us at 904-549-2937. We have a question from Ross. He says, last month, Mayor Deegan came out in favor of marijuana legalization. If Amendment 3 passes, that's the state amendment that would make recreational marijuana legal, would the mayor support a ban on smoking weed in public spaces like our parks and beaches?
Yeah, well, I am for, people not smoking in public places no matter what they're smoking, but yeah, I think that's the thing that the legislature will still have the opportunity to do. What I don't wanna see is for people to have jail time because they have a small amount of marijuana. I think that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think there are all sorts of parameters that can be put in place in terms of how people can and where people can do that. But certainly, I would be in favor of no smoking in public spaces.
What do you hear from your law enforcement friends? I mean, we know that that very often is an excuse. I don't want to say an excuse, but it's a reason often that leads to additional searches. Police will smell the odor of marijuana and use that as a justification for an additional search. But if it's legal, they would lose that tool.
Well, they would, but I do think, just like with anything else, I think you have to look at the preponderance of what you're dealing with here, and I think that at the end of the day, it makes sense to move in this direction.
Got a question from Julie on Twitter. She's on X. Will say, will dredging the river for port improvements affect these low lying areas? I guess that's related to the flooding we're talking about.
Well, certainly we know in some areas it has an effect. That is the balance that we have to strike. But I do believe that in some areas it does have a deleterious effect on some neighborhoods. But again, I think that is the really important reason, and I'll say it a million times because the work has been so tremendous that Ann Colanesi and her team has done in creating this new compound flood model, is it literally tells us street by street, block by block, where we can expect flooding. And we're already working with the development community. I know this does not help people in older communities necessarily, but it at least informs us about when things are going to be bad. But it informs us of where we should be building, where we may have to take extra precautions, where we may need additional infrastructure, because we will know with pretty good um, reliability where and how it's going to flood. So where should we build? Where should we not build? Where do we need more drainage?
And also, where do we need to retreat from? Right? I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that the idea for me would be, let's put incentives into place for development that makes sense. It's another reason why I'm constantly beating the drum for infill downtown. In addition to so many other reasons, it's a good place to build. But there are other places that we really do have a lot of issues, and we need to make sure that we're paying attention to that when we build. And we want to incentivize our development community to build in those places that, and obviously they want to make money, and that makes sense. But we want to make sure that we're building in places where perhaps if we can show this data to insurance companies going forward, perhaps we can lower people's insurance rates. There's all sorts of wonderful things you can do with data, and I think that if we can show people we're building responsibly in areas that are not going to flood historically, that would be helpful to us.
we've got a call from Catherine in Murray Hill. Good morning, Catherine. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you. You somewhat answered my question. I'm interested in do you know of and can you access, and does the Biden administration have any funds to help cities, to help mayors do things like buy back land and housing that is, in no longer sustainable places, things like that. Is there help for us as we go forward? The patchwork approach of development incentives and all that is fabulous.
Well, yeah, Catherine, I can tell you that this administration has just been incredibly helpful when it's come to all kinds of issues in terms of climate, and that's one of the things that Ann and I were talking about. Ann Colanesi and I were talking about yesterday. Is right now, if you have a storm come through your neighborhood or a hurricane, a tropical system, or whatever, and there is damage, you can get help from FEMA. What happens if we have an extreme heat event and we have roads that melt because it's getting hotter and hotter? At some point, there has to be a discussion of what happens as the heat continues to become more extreme, and that causes problems for homeowners or streets or whatever. So I think that's an ongoing conversation. I'll have to look into exactly what all is available to communities right now, but I will say that this administration has been extremely sensitive to issues that communities face because of climate, and I think that will continue in terms of forward-looking things that we can do to mitigate problems for homeowners.
And to be clear, currently you don't know of anything that is like a FEMA for heat events or some
There
sort
is
of.
there is not anything right now, but it's one of those things that I know there's going to be a big heat conference in D.C. on Friday that Ann will be attending. There's a climate conference coming up in New York where there'll be a lot of discussion about that. But this is where these conversations are moving, not just in terms of water and storm surge and things like that, but what happens as we continue to have a hotter and hotter environment, and you have situations where you do have things like melting asphalt that end up causing problems.
I know that there's a city out west too that like created a chief heat officer, like
Mhm.
kind of an emergency, or not an emergency, a permanent position that's focused on mitigating and also helping to deal with crises.
Well, our chief health officer and our office of health actually does that as well. I mean, that's one of the things we did when we created the cooling centers. We are very focused on all those things that will affect people's health because of heat. So it's something we all need to focus on because it's unfortunately not going to get any better anytime soon.
There's a call we've got from Jason in San Marco. Good morning, Jason. Go ahead.
Good morning. I had a quick question for the mayor, and I want to say really love having you in the mayor's office. I think your predecessor did one interview like this in 8 years, and so I'm really appreciate your ability to listen to your constituents. My
Well, thank
question
you.
is about putting in a crosswalk for students and faculty at Wolfson School. It sits on Powers Boulevard, which is a very busy 4-lane highway. They've just put in about 500 residential units right across from the street.
Yeah.
People that live there have no safe way to cross the street between 2:45 p.m. and 3:15 p.m. on school days. And when I spoke to my school board member, she said it's a state law. We only get crosswalks for elementary schools. So I'm wondering if there's a way to get a temporary one over there during the school year from 2:45 to 3:15, maybe some portable plastic signs that are placed out on Powers Boulevard, and ask people to drive at 25 miles an hour or 20 during that short period of time. My son is a senior. I'm convinced it's only a matter of time before there's a serious accident
Yeah.
there. I will take your response off the air, and thank you for taking my call.
Listen, I really appreciate that call. What I wanted to ask him, because I'm not sure, and I should be sure, but I want to say his council person is council person Arias, but I'm not positive about that because I seem to remember this from one of our community meetings when those units were going up, and there was a lot of concern about that being across from Wolfson. I know there was a great deal of discussion about possible solutions on that, but I would have to check and see the status of it. I certainly understand the concern, and it seems like that we should be able to do something that would ensure the safety of those kids.
It seems like it would be strange for a state law to limit it just to elementary school. So I've not heard that before.
There are all kinds of strange state laws that limit things we can do, Ann, but that's a whole nother discussion.
We've got a question from Jim on Facebook. He says, would the mayor consider storm and flood damage to property blight? Could the mayor use the blight initiative as a tool to mitigate this property damage caused by flooding?
I think there are many number of tools that we could look at, but I don't know that we need that as a tool. But I do think that it's worth discussing anything that might be able to help us get our arms around this. But I think at this point, we are doing the things that we can do. And we will continue to look also for state and federal assistance when it comes to those things. But I know people are frustrated by the amount of flooding that we're having right now, and I completely understand that. I would simply say that we are putting processes in place, and we are spending a lot of money to try to improve our infrastructure, and sometimes those systems are still going to be overwhelmed.
Yeah. I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about an issue that has come up recently with your chief of staff, Darnell Smith.
Hmm.
So he splits his time currently as an executive on loan from Florida Blue. He doesn't take a city salary. He's paid by Florida Blue, but recently he's had to take some time off to handle negotiations between the insurance company and Baptist
Yeah.
Health.
Hmm.
There have been some critics in City Hall that have said, he can't sit on both sides of the aisle. That the people who work for the city of Jacksonville are insured by Florida Blue. Isn't there a conflict there?
Well, there's not a conflict. We've already checked that with both the state ethics office and with our general counsel, and they say there is no conflict as long as he does not negotiate between the city and Florida Blue. That would be a conflict. In terms of this, this is something that Darnell obviously is intimately acquainted with. And has been doing for many, many years. And I believe that because, from my perspective as mayor, I don't have a dog in this hunt besides the fact that I want a solution. These are two of our biggest employers in the city. We have thousands of city employees that are on our plan at City Hall. We have tens of thousands of people in the city that are affected because of this, at this point, inability to come to a conclusion. And I just want it resolved. For everybody, access to healthcare is incredibly important to me. As you know, it's been one of the top things that I have talked about since I came into office. The health of our community, incredibly important. I'm hearing from people that have surgery scheduled. They're very concerned. It is becoming a situation that needs to be resolved. So, I think that if Darnell can help bring that in for a landing, I think that's fantastic. But I don't see how anyone would think that created a conflict of interest.
So that negotiation is part of the concern that was raised. And I think the other part being, there are other interactions that Florida Blue has with the city, whether it's serving as a landlord of the Florida Blue building, which JSO recently moved into, or, just the business that it has with the city.
Yeah, and Darnell has played no role in any of that.
Mhm.
He has specifically been asked by Pat Garrity to come in and see if he can help negotiate.
Pat Garrity being
the CEO of Florida Blue, to see if he can negotiate this deal. Darnell right now is frankly spending the majority of his time over there. He's still trying to tie up the community benefits agreement, which there'll be a vote on tonight, the budget, which there'll be a vote on the 24th, and he's been an integral part of all that. So he's got to continue to help us tie up those very, very important issues. But beyond that, I think that his attention, and understandably so, is on trying to make sure that this is a settled thing.
And you're, I guess, vetting people for that role because he's leaving in December one way or the other.
Right. That's right. Darnell's with us for the next couple of months, unless he has to go back sooner, given all this. But yeah, so we're talking about that right now.
We're talking to Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan, and we're taking your calls and questions. We've got a call from Amy in Springfield. Amy, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a scientist, a water quality scientist, and I just want to say thank you so much for everything you're doing. It's very appreciated, and I understand a lot about the background, and I just think you're doing an amazing job.
Well, thank you so much. I'll always take a compliment. No question. I'll take it.
All right. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Take
Appreciate
a call
that.
from Janelle in Ortega Forest. Good morning, Janelle. Go ahead.
Yes, the other night I was coming home and taking a road that I usually take, and it was totally flooded. It's a very poorly lit road,
Mhm.
and I had trouble trying to find how to contact the city and see if we could get some kind of signage there or somebody to alert. There was already another car that was stuck in it, and I couldn't find any way on the city website how to report, or who do I report that to?
Well, at 630 City is the best thing to do to call and give us information. We turn that around very, very quickly.
Is that 24 hours or?
I believe it is 24 hours, yeah. And at any event, I mean, certainly you can always call, if you're worried about something being emergent, you can always call emergency services. But at the end of the day, we have been very, very on top of every one of those complaints that's come in. But if it's a safety issue, certainly, that's something we would want to take a look at and see if we can put signage or something there if that is an issue that's going to be ongoing. We don't want people driving into flooded water. I mean, we've put out those alerts through Jack's Ready over and over and over again, and that's another site that I would encourage you to engage with. Jack's Ready is our basically our arm that deals with all of those things.
And you can also download like the app, right?
You
And get
absolutely
alerts and-
can and get alerts and get information. So if there is a more efficient way than 630 City, I'm not sure I know it, but I will find out if there's another number you can call.
We've got another call from Samari, also in Ortega. Good morning, Samari. Go ahead.
Good morning, y'all. Hope y'all are doing good.
Doing good.
Madam Mayor, my question is very quickly, if I get to spit this out. With the zoning and land use department, I'm just wondering if you have that on your radar to take an interest in to possibly see if there can be improvements when you think about the issue with the liquor store and the liquor licenses on the north side, and then the building there in Brentwood, the Department of Health or crematorium or whatever it is. These issues, it seems like maybe we're not paying attention to the personnel in zoning and land use. And then just I guess B would be, Jacksonville was destroyed by fire 100 years ago, and yet we are allowing new developments in the vicinity of downtown that are the wood frame buildings. And to me, I'm just looking at the long term, and I can see like a possible, we already had the apartments that burnt down that had the fire. Are we really looking to history to inform us on the future?
Well, listen, look, to compare what we have in terms of fire technology now to 1901 I don't think that's fair. 90% of our buildings that go up in the city are wood frame buildings. That's 90% of our houses. That's so I don't think you can assume because something has complete or partial wood framing that it's going to go up in flames. There are a lot of things that we put in place to make sure that doesn't happen. When you have taller structures, bigger structures, the steel frame structures make more sense. But you would be pricing yourself out of just about everything if you required that every building be block or steel frame. That's not something that is realistic. But there's also no reason to believe that the safeguards that are put in place in most of these buildings shouldn't safeguard us from fire, or to at the very least make it less likely. So I hear your point, but I think that to compare this to 1901 is probably not fair. What was the other question?
Zoning, whether we've got the right people
Yeah,
in place.
listen, I have been somewhat frustrated by some of the situations that have been coming out of that, and I think we need to look at how our overlay system is working, what places might also need an overlay that perhaps don't have that, a neighborhood overlay. But to see those overlays constantly overridden, it's sort of like what we do with some ordinances all the time. I mean, I don't understand why we have them if that's how we're going to treat them. And I would like to see.
Are you thinking sort of specifically of the storage facility?
Yeah,
the
I
South
mean
Bank
the
area?
storage facility, but beyond that, I do understand what he's saying about the personnel. There has seemed to be a willingness to overlook what a lot of people in those communities want. And I think that we need to pay closer attention to that. And certainly in terms of personnel, yes, I do pay very close attention to that.
And you think that's a zoning personnel issue as opposed to like a city council representative issue?
I think it's both.
Mm-hmm. He also mentioned the issue of the medical examiner's office, I think was what he was alluding
Yep.
to.
That was something that was put in place before I got into office, and it was already way down the road by the time that I took office. So I don't really know. I don't really understand the dynamics that caused all of that to take place. When when we had the issue with the liquor store, which he also brought up, we immediately started to take steps to buy that as the city and turn it into an innovation center for the North Side. So it's something that our Jacksonville Small and Emerging Business um, office is taking over and hoping to create a great opportunity there for the citizens. But I do understand the frustration around all this. I really do. I think there needs to be a greater attention paid to the will of the communities when it comes to these decisions.
We have a question from Michael on Facebook. He says, does the mayor see executive action for a civilian review board as a possibility for more public accountability into the deaths in the jail, along with other public safety measures?
I will say it again, as I have said before. I have repeatedly said that I absolutely favor accountability in all aspects of government. It is illegal in the state of Florida to have a civilian review board. That wasn't the case before a year or two ago, but it is now. There were a handful around the state that I think were performing pretty well. It was never the case in the state of Florida that a civilian review board could have any sort of authority over a police department. That's never been the case. It's basically been more of an advisory board. But those are not possible. So there would be no executive order that I could create.
Because the legislature outlawed them.
The legislature outlawed it. So it's not an option under state law.
Fair enough. Tom on Facebook saying, why is Jacksonville not getting manufacturing jobs coming into the city?
Manufacturing jobs. We have just had, two really wonderful companies that have come here to manufacture some pretty amazing things.
Let's talk about those a little bit.
In fact, it's been an amazing week for us. We had actually, the last few weeks we had Anderson Dubose come in on the North Side, which is an industry leader in food distribution and safety, as well as in diversity and inclusion, which makes me very happy. And the company values align with ours. It's a fantastic company. Holon, which we just celebrated last week, is truly a game changer. We are the very first, it's a German company that manufactures AI-driven vehicles, autonomous electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. And they will be producing those vehicles manufacturing those vehicles in Jacksonville for the entire world. They're going to be shipping all over the world from Jacksonville.
This is vehicles. Their first location in the States.
First location in the country.
Yeah.
This is us. We are the U.S.
I meant the States, the United States.
Yes, in the United States. Yeah. So huge manufacturing opportunity for us and a leading industry, an industry that will lead us into the future, which I love, the innovation there. And then yesterday, we cut the ribbon on Hermeus, which is opening a hypersonic test facility in Jacksonville. So that's going to help us in aerospace. It will eventually, and they are working on a lot of clean technology to make
Cecil Field.
That's at Cecil Field. That will help us not only militarily to remain supreme in the skies in terms of what we're developing in terms of aircraft engines, but will also help us in terms of commercial traffic eventually to create cleaner and faster ways to travel by air.
So is there any through line with those companies announcing that they're locating in Jacksonville that you can see any policy, any factor that is bringing them to Jacksonville?
Well, sure. I mean, we've said it repeatedly. This is a wonderful place to live, work, and play. We say it all the time, but here we are next to the interstate, next to the river, next to the ocean. Our logistics, are such that we can reach 98% of the country within 24 hours. So companies see all that. Plus, they see our quality of life. They see that we have a low cost of living. And the word is just getting out that Jacksonville is a great place to do business. And when you see all of this infrastructure for these companies coming in, imagine all of the other companies that are going to be coming in that are offering, supporting type of manufacturing jobs. So this is just the beginning. And I think it's very exciting to see in Jacksonville that these types of jobs are coming.
We're talking to Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan. You can join our conversation by calling 904-549-2937 or by emailing us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. We have a call from Heddle in Arlington. Good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning, Ann, and good morning, Mayor Deegan. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to find out what the city is doing about Sunny Acres Park in Arlington. Myself and neighbors have complained many times that it's sat empty since COVID and has been unusable. And I know they have a lot of plans to make it where it's handicap accessible, but nothing's happened in over 2-3 years. And it's kind of the story of Arlington where, Regency hasn't really been developed. We had a YMCA right next to us that was a great place for children to go that is no longer there. So I'm just wondering what the plans are to see more improvements in the Arlington area.
Who is your city council representative? Do you know that?
Well, at the time we did reach out to Al Ferrero, and we're told.
Would that be Councilman
we were told,
Amaro? Either Amaro, and then at large would be, I guess, would that be Ron Salem?
I don't know about the at large, but
Yes.
that would be Ken Amaro, I think, for the Arlington area.
Yeah. So I think that the most important thing is you have to make sure that your current council representative is hearing from you, and hearing from the folks in your neighborhood. But beyond that, I will say that there have been some steps, and I will praise JU specifically for a lot of the things that they're doing in the surrounding community around where they are, and that is Arlington, to create a lot more pathways. And there's been a lot that has been happening out there close to JU. Beyond that, I'm not exactly sure the location of where you're talking about. But I do know that there's, Arlington is a proud community that has had some issues in the last, couple of decades. And I do understand the frustration there, but I will certainly be happy to check with Councilman Amaro and Councilman Salem on that particular issue. But I couldn't tell you I know exactly where that is.
Thanks, Huddle. We have an email from Doug. He says, I know it might be a bit off subject, but with the extreme development going on the north side, New Berlin Road needs sidewalks badly, especially between Yellow Bluff and Dunn Creek roads. Thanks for your hard work.
Well, thank you. I think, again, I will say it's incredibly important. This is a large city, and it's incredibly important for people to bring those issues to the city council and to us. I don't know where that stands, if there has been a move to create sidewalks out there, but I know that a lot of our communities need sidewalks. We have made infrastructure the number one issue since I came into office, and we have prioritized communities that have not seen the investment from infrastructure in quite a long time, because those are the ones, frankly, that very often have the worst problems. But I would say make sure that your council person is aware of exactly where you're talking about, and let's make sure that we're focusing on those issues that are important to the community.
Yeah, I mean, the area Doug's talking about has had so much rapid growth in recent years, where just these communities pop up out of, nowhere
Right.
for the people that have lived there a long time.
Sure.
And maybe not any requirement that developers are building sidewalks along those adjacent roads.
I think that's another great point, Ann. I think we have to make sure that when communities go in, that those things are all considered. I think that's a really important piece of what we need to do when we're developing these new communities, is to make sure that the amenities around just where those houses are going are created as well.
Susan on Facebook has a question for you. Is she frustrated? She means you, by the city council. Are you frustrated by the city council?
Sometimes, sure. I will tell you that working with Council President White has been really fantastic. He is, as I said the other day, he is the least political person I have worked with since I came into office, and I appreciate that very much. I am, as I've said so many times, so very much not a fan of political theater, and he has not a drop of that in him. He just wants to get things done, and clearly we don't always agree on everything, and that's okay. Sometimes you come to your best governance that way, but he has been very, very good to work with in terms of where can we get to?
Yeah.
And that's really all you can ask. I can sometimes be frustrated with folks who seem to put politics above policy. But that's the world we live in right now. So it's something that I have to navigate. And I will just, as sappy as this may sound, and I think Randy would tell you the same thing. I think we both put our love for Jacksonville above anything else. And so at the end of the day, that's how we approach every issue that we face together. And how can we get to a place where this makes life better for people in Jacksonville? And so I will say, at the very least, it has been wonderful to work with him in that regard.
And for people who don't know, he, of course, is a Republican.
Yep.
You're a Democrat. You guys have probably very different philosophies about a lot of things.
Absolutely. But we also, as I've said so many times, in local government, there's just not that much need for all of this political nonsense. And we both believe that. So much of it is exactly the type of topics that we're talking about today. Can we put a sidewalk on this street? Do we need drainage on this street? What infrastructure needs to go in? What policies can we put in place to make life better for our citizens? It doesn't. The same issues that get brought down to us locally from the national scene or even state politics are really issues we don't need to deal with here so much. But we unfortunately, and it's an election year, get caught up in a lot of that hyperbole and everything else, and that's just how it goes. But it's part of the deal.
We've got a call from Jim in Orange Park. Good morning, Jim. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. I've been a resident off and on, a military vet. I've been a resident off and on in Jacksonville. I've been back now for the last 6 years. And I just want to shout out to the mayor. I listen to the show all the time, and your accessibility, your transparency, especially in with all this political one-sidedness that's going on. I just wanted to give you a shout out and say, even though I don't live in Duval County, I think you're doing great, and just keep it up. You're a breath of fresh air.
Well, thank you so much, and I would encourage you to move to Duval County. That's what I say to everybody. It's not that I don't love our surrounding counties, but I would love to have people that feel that way
Yeah.
who move to Duval County. No, that I appreciate that, and I appreciate your service too, sir. I've said so many times that we aim to be the most military friendly city in the country, and I have such great respect for the folks who serve, and I think that it's one of the things that is never going to be a problem between myself and the city council. I think we're both in lockstep in terms of wanting to make sure that our military men and women get the services that they need and the respect they need. So I appreciate that caller.
We've got we've got an email from Fabrizio. He says, so many states and municipalities require restaurants to prominently display their health inspection score in the window. It allows consumers to make more informed decisions, and it also incentivizes restaurants to prioritize cleanliness. Why don't we do that here in Jacksonville?
I don't know. That's a great idea. I've not heard of that, but I will certainly ask.
All right. Well, there you go. Budget. Today, there is a big vote on, not really the budget itself, but it's this community benefits agreement that has been top of mind, I think, for you.
Absolutely.
Following on the Jaguars deal. So what's your expectation tonight? Is it going to look remotely like you would like it to?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, we got 90% of what we wanted there. And I think that we got all the money, which is fantastic, right? So $40 million, so an additional $10 million, I believe they'll sign off going to the east side. That will be stretched out over 7 years. Where I'm not as happy, but I'm, obviously it's a compromise effort. The big goal with all this was to make sure, and this is how we sold it to the Jaguars, why they were willing to give us an additional $50 million. We'll provide the seed money for a lot of these projects that we really want to move the dial on. So we'll make that big upfront investment, and then you all come in over 30 years and give us that $1 million a year or whatever it is that will help sustain those programs, right? When you stretch it out, you don't get quite the impact that you would have gotten. Now, I will say this: there's no limit to saying we can't go. There's no one saying we can't go in and put it all in 1 year. What they're saying is you have 7 years to get it done. And on the community-wide piece of affordable housing and workforce development, they're saying, I think we're now down to 15 years. They were saying 33 years. I wanted a handful of years. So 13 years to get it done, but I could put all that money in the budget next year if it's there. The only restriction would be if we had, I believe there was an amendment put in that if we had growth of under 3% or something like that, which doesn't normally happen for us. I think that would be the trigger to say we need to wait and move more slowly. But at the end of the day, the money has been allocated. We are going to get it in and infused into these communities as quickly as we possibly can. And the limit on that would be 15 years.
I want to ask you about the homelessness issue and the initiative that the city is taking. That's another big chunk of money that's in the budget, but is it enough to make any significant difference in your mind in the homeless problem?
You're talking about the initiative that we have proposed?
Mhm.
Well, yeah. I mean, that is it's a plan that we feel extremely good about. It's a 12-point plan that includes outreach teams and data collection and more beds and hotel rooms and wraparound services, and frankly, the things that the state law told us to target. And so our plan is a $13.6 million plan. We asked the city council for 10 million. We only have until October 1st before this law goes into place that says people can't sleep on the streets. We can be sued as of January 1st if we don't put these policies in place. The city council has said, we'll give you 2.5 million to get started. They put the rest of that money under the line, which means we can come back and get it later. I would love to get more of that money into the budget now. I think there is a desire to keep the money coming out of reserves under a certain level. So I don't know if we will get any more of that money up front right now. But I think the idea is let's get it started, and then you can come back and get more of that money that's underneath the line. So at the very least, we'll get it started. But I will tell you, it is an exceptional plan. It's one that we put a great deal of time and effort with experts in this space into, and I do believe it will help us once and for all solve this problem of homelessness and get us to functional zero, which means not more people coming in than going out. You know what I'm saying?
But we know that 2 million, 10 million is not going to be enough to accomplish that. I mean, what is a figure that you think could actually get us to a point where people are not facing these crises that are putting them on the streets and finding the resources they need to get them off?
Well, as I said, 13.6 million is the total. We were going to go after another 3.6 million from the private sector, and
And you
we'll
think that's
continue to do that.
sufficient?
Look, nothing is ever completely sufficient, right? But I think it will absolutely get us a long way toward creating a system where we're not just constantly recycling people off and onto the streets. If we can get people into stable housing, get them the wraparound services they need, and this whole partnership we have now with JFRD, where JFRD will come in and provide those services that actually the outreach to the community. They're in the best position to do that. We've also got JSO that is there to help, but at the end of the day, they're the most expensive and final option. We want to try to keep people out of the legal system if we possibly can. But I think, yes, I do, Ann. I think this will take us a long way towards solving that problem.
Well, I'm sure it's something we'll be talking about going forward. That's all the time we have. You going to watch the debate tonight? You going to stay up?
Of course.
All right. Mayor Donna Deegan.
If I can, I may have to take a nap first.
Right. A disco nap. All right. Mayor Donna Deegan, thank you so much for being on today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.